It began with a murmur. Not the sort you hear outright, but the kind that brushes against the nape of your neck when you're alone. The kind that makes you stop, even when the world around you hums along smoothly. Have you ever been caught mid-task, suddenly wondering, how did I end up here? This is one of those tales. They wanted to observe, and we allowed it. I know how that sounds. Trust me, I do. If you had told me years ago, I'd find myself in such a moment, where gazes lingered too long, where the air grew heavy, where glances spoke louder than words, I'd have laughed. Laughed and slammed the door on the idea. But here's the truth. When you felt invisible for too long, when the one who once saw you as the only star in their sky starts glancing at their phone more than your face, you begin to yearn for something, anything, to feel seen again. I wasn't chasing chaos. I was just exhausted. Exhausted from folding laundry while my heart remained creased. Exhausted from setting the table for someone who barely muttered thanks. Exhausted from lying beside a man who felt oceans away, even with his body next to mine. Then they arrived. The new neighbors, Jake and Laya. Young, vibrant, overly warm. People who smile with their whole being and hold your gaze a beat too long. I didn't notice it at first, or perhaps I did. But I convinced myself otherwise, because it's simpler to ignore what you're craving than to admit you're famished. It started innocently enough. Drinks on their patio, shared laughter, a casual game night. But then came that one evening. The wine flowed freely. The jokes grew bolder, and Laya leaned close, whispering. Sometimes it's more thrilling to just watch. I blinked slowly, half laughing it off, half dissecting every unspoken word. I glanced at my husband, expecting him to brush it aside. But he didn't. He just smiled. A slow, crooked smile I hadn't seen in months. That's when I felt the ground shift. I don't expect you to grasp this immediately. Most won't. Most people see life in stark contrasts, good or bad, right or wrong, stay or go. But life, real life, thrives in the in-between. That night, that moment, was the first time in ages I felt truly seen. Not just my form, but my longing, my absence, my quiet erosion into nothingness. 2 years later, I still replay that night, as if it's woven into my very being. Not because I'm proud of what happened, but because I still don't know who I was then. Was I a woman desperate to feel alive, or one fading in a life that looked flawless from the outside? They wanted to watch, and we let them. Everything changed. So, if you've ever stumbled into a moment you couldn't justify, one you didn't plan but couldn't halt, then stay. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales. Unfold, because this isn't merely a story. It's a confession, and it begins here. I once believed I had an ordinary marriage, until ordinary began to feel like isolation wrapped in routine. You know the kind. Mornings where the silence over coffee drowns out any argument. Evenings where the television speaks more than your spouse. Nights where touch has vanished, but presence lingers like a husk without a spirit. My husband, Mark, was never cruel. He didn't shout. He didn't stray, not in the way people imagine. But he stopped seeing me. Not in a poetic sense, but truly seeing me. Noticing the fatigue behind my smile, the hitch in my laugh, the way I'd pause in the hallway, hoping for a glance, a touch, anything. He worked late. He brought his laptop to bed. On the rare nights he didn't, he brought his silence instead. I used to dress up to catch his eye at dinner. Now, I barely ran a brush through my hair. What's the point of glowing when no one notices? That's where I was when they arrived. Jake and Laya, a young couple, perhaps a decade our junior, moved in next door on a bright Sunday morning. All grins, sunglasses, and loud music, spilling from their car as they unloaded. They stood out in our neighborhood. Not rigid, not formal, not obsessed with appearances. They laughed often, touched each other freely, and looked at you when they spoke, like your words mattered. Our first meeting was mundane, over trash bins. Laya waved, brimming with energy, asking about recycling schedules. Jake stood behind her, shirtless, sun glinting off his skin, flashing a confident grin like he knew we'd be friends. At first, it was small gestures. A quick hello during evening strolls. A bottle of wine left at our door just because. Then it grew. They invited us over. Movie nights, card games, laughter that stretched into the early hours. Their home was alive with candles, music, soft blankets, eclectic pillows. It wasn't a magazine spread. It was lived in, warm. And God, I craved that warmth. Soon, we were at their place more than our own. Mark seemed lighter there. He smiled more, even touched my hand during conversations, as if Jake and Laya reminded him I was there. But here's what I didn't expect. It wasn't Mark who felt reawakened. It was me. Jake had a way of looking at me a moment too long, not improper, just curious, like he saw something beneath my surface and wasn't afraid to linger. Leah noticed everything. A new nail color, she'd comment. If I looked weary, she'd ask softly, "Tough day?" Sometimes, when Mark wasn't around, she'd tilt her head and say, "You're too stunning to look so sad." At first, I thought it was just her nature, friendly, bold, unfiltered. But then came the glances, the touches that lingered. Jake's hand brushing the small of my back as he passed me in their kitchen. Laya resting her head on my shoulder during a movie night, stroking my arm, murmuring, "You always smell so soft." It was subtle, but unforgettable. And Mark, he never said a word. Either he didn't notice or he did and didn't care. That hurt most, because part of me wanted him to care, to pull me aside, to demand what was happening, to fight for me, but he didn't. He let the invitations continue, let the nights grow longer, let Jake and Laya's comfort become our new normal. Somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling guilty for enjoying their company more than his. I told myself it was harmless. Just four adults laughing, drinking, playing silly games on the floor like teenagers. But I felt it. The slow drift toward something we lacked the courage to name. There was one night I'll never forget. We were all on their couch, too close, too warm, too many glasses of wine deep. Laya leaned into me. Jake was massaging Mark's shoulders. And everyone was laughing when she whispered, low and sultry, like it was meant to sink into my skin. "Have you ever wondered what it's like to be watched?" I laughed nervously, shrugging it off as playful. But her eyes didn't waver. Jake smiled from across the room. And Mark? He didn't say a thing, just looked at his drink and smirked. That was the first fracture in the glass. The moment I realized we weren't just four friends sharing wine anymore. We were stepping towards something else. Strange, thrilling. Something I wasn't sure I wanted, but couldn't stop thinking about. Jake and Laya were different. Open, intense, curious. Maybe we were too bored, too numb, too broken to see the warning signs. Or maybe we saw them and didn't care. Because when you've spent so long in a room where no one sees you, one gaze can set everything ablaze. It was a Friday evening, the kind that should have felt ordinary. But as we crossed the lawn to Jake and Laya's, I sensed a difference. The air was thick, heavy, unrelated to the weather. Their house glowed warmly through the windows, candles flickering, soft music playing, the kind of scene that makes time disappear. I remember the door opening before we knocked. Laia stood there in a silk robe barely skimming her thighs, laughing like she'd been waiting for this all day. Jake behind her, shirt unbuttoned, sleeves rolled up, 2 glasses of wine already in hand. They welcomed us, like we were more than neighbors, like we were lovers reunited. Their energy that night was looser, freer, almost daring us to notice. We sank into their oversized couch, cushions enveloping us. Laia poured wine. Jake brought a tray of olives and dark chocolate, a pairing she claimed awakened the senses. I should have known then. It was never about the wine. The conversation started as usual. Work, nosy neighbors, the latest show. But then Laia curled her legs beneath her, sipped her drink slowly, and turned to Mark. "Mark," she said, smiling, "has anyone ever told you your voice is soothing?" Her tone dipped, hinting at something more. A flicker sparked in my chest. Not jealousy, not exactly, but something heavier, something I hadn't felt in ages. Mark chuckled, a bit flustered. No, not really." He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. I was already watching him, noting how he didn't mind. Jake was beside me, close enough that I felt his warmth. He leaned in too far to grab a grape, his hand brushing my arm. I didn't pull away. I didn't speak. Then it happened. Laia looked between us, letting the silence stretch, then said with a mischievous grin, "You ever wonder what it'd feel like to just watch?" The room stilled, just long enough for me to realize she wasn't joking. Not entirely. Mark gave a low, polite laugh, the kind you offer when you're unsure whether to be offended or intrigued. Jake raised an eyebrow, waiting to see where the night would lead. I laughed too loud, too fast, trying to bury discomfort in sound. But my skin burned, not from shame, but from something else. A heat I hadn't felt in years, born not from touch but from being noticed. I found myself wondering what it would be like, not just to be watched, but to be seen, truly seen. Mark didn't flinch, didn't glance my way, didn't seem surprised or amused. He just smiled. That lazy, crooked smile I hadn't seen in months. The one he used to give me when I was the only woman in the room. I stayed silent. What could I say? That I missed this feeling? That Jake and Laia made me feel younger? Wanted? Alive? That part of me liked the idea of being watched. That I was starting to imagine what it might feel like to perform again. Not for the world, not for social media, but for someone's undivided attention. I told myself it was a joke, a wild comment fueled by wine. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. And the worst part? I wasn't scared of that shift. I was curious. Later, as we walked home in silence, Mark didn't mention Laia's comment. He didn't ask if it unsettled me. He didn't note how close Jake sat, or how Laia's gaze lingered. He just slid into bed, turned off the light, and stared at the ceiling until his breathing softened into sleep. But I lay awake, eyes wide, heart pounding, not from fear of what had happened, but from fear of what I wanted next. I knew we were past pretending. They wanted to watch, and part of me wanted to let them. Is it cheating if nothing happens? Or is it worse to want it? That question haunted me, trailing me through grocery stores while folding towels when Mark grabbed his keys, pecked my cheek, and left without truly seeing me. Nothing had happened. Not really. But something had changed. I thought of Jake too often. The way he looked at me. Not like a man eyeing another's wife, but like someone who saw my fractures and didn't look away. Curious about who I was before routine dulled my edges. And Laya, she was no better. Her compliments carried a hunger, a playfulness that never felt casual, like she knew I was unraveling and was content to watch it happen thread by thread. I told myself it was harmless, that adults flirt, that craving attention wasn't a crime. But I changed in small ways. I spent more time getting ready for their place, wearing lip gloss Mark hadn't noticed in months, choosing tops that clung to my waist, just in case Jake's eyes wandered. And they did. I noticed how his gaze dropped when I reached for the wine, how his fingers lingered when they grazed mine, how Laya's compliments came with smiles that lasted too long. I hated myself for liking it, but not enough to stop. Around them, I felt awake, like I'd been asleep for years until someone gently shook me and whispered, "There you are." Mark didn't notice, or pretended not to. He still worked late, scrolled through his phone during dinner, gave routine kisses that tasted of nothing. So I drifted closer to something I swore I'd never consider. Some nights, lying beside Mark, I'd close my eyes and replay that evening in their living room. The way their glances felt like touches. How Mark smiled at the suggestion, like he'd already considered it. How I didn't say no. Was that consent? Permission? Or surrender? I'd stare at my reflection, tilting my head, silently asking, "Who are you becoming?" But I lacked the courage to answer, because part of me liked her. This version of me that was wanted, seen, felt, even if only in someone else's gaze. I wondered if Laya's comment was a jest or a proposition. If it was a proposition, why didn't it scare me? I'd pass their house, my heart fluttering if I glimpsed Jake mowing the lawn or Laya at her blinds. I'd pretend it was chance, just a walk. But I knew I was hoping to be noticed. It wasn't about acting. Not yet. It was the rush, the possibility, the ache of what if? What if we said yes? What if we stopped pretending? Some nights, I'd run my fingers through my hair before bed, wondering if they were watching. Would they like what they saw? Then I'd shake the thought away, disgusted, because I'm married. I chose this life. I built this home. Yet guilt never outweighed the thrill. It just sat there, watching me inch towards something I couldn't name. Was I a bad wife or just lonely? Was I craving something wrong or just trying to feel alive? I'd like to believe there's a difference, that wanting isn't doing, that longing doesn't make me a traitor. But late at night, when the house was still and I was awake, I wasn't sure. That scared me most. The second invitation came on a Wednesday. No pretext, no game night, no occasion. Just a message from Laya. "Drinks tonight, just us. No need to dress up unless you want to." With a winking emoji. I stared at it too long. It wasn't the words. It was the feeling like a soft knock on a door I hadn't fully closed. I showed it to Mark. He read it, nodded, and without looking up said, "Sure, it's been a while." No questions, no pause. Just sure. That night, I didn't plan to dress up, but I did. I chose the black top with the low neckline, the one I wore when Mark and I used to dance, back when we did such things. I wore perfume, not his favorite, but mine, the one that made me feel alive, feminine, maybe dangerous. Their house was dimly lit when we arrived, just candles and jazz. Jake opened the door, his smile easy, shirt half unbuttoned. Leia greeted us barefoot, in silk again, as if soft fabrics were her shield. No small talk, no chatter about work or weather, just laughter too loose, wine poured too full. We sat close, closer than usual, elbows touching, knees brushing without apology. Then the conversation shifted. Laia mentioned a documentary on human desire, saying, tracing her glass's rim, that watching someone can be more intimate than touching them. Mark didn't flinch or shift uncomfortably. He sipped his wine and asked, "How so?" Jake's voice was low, deliberate, because touching is obvious, but watching takes patience, curiosity, restraint. Later leaned forward, ice flicking between us. You learn a lot from what people let you see. The silence that followed was suffocating. The wine burned deeper in my throat, and I couldn't tell if we were discussing a documentary or something else entirely. Mark smirked. The same smirk from before, saying, "I know, and I'm not stopping it." My heart thudded, not from fear, but adrenaline. The lines were gone. No one spoke the words. No one asked. But they didn't need to. After 2 glasses, Laia changed the music to something slower, sensual. Jake asked about our first date, how we met, how long we'd been together. Questions that peeled back layers, not about our marriage, but about me. What made me laugh, what attention I missed, what I thought of unspoken fantasies. I answered cautiously but honestly. Mark never stopped me. I caught him watching me, not with disapproval, but curiosity, or maybe detachment, like he wanted to see how far I'd go. We left around midnight. Not drunk, not sober, in that hazy middle where inhibitions soften. The walk home was silent. Mark didn't take my hand, and I didn't offer mine. But at home, something odd happened. Mark didn't close the curtains. I waited, expecting him to. He met my eyes, said nothing, and went upstairs. I stayed. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain open, just a sliver, just enough to be seen. It wasn't a statement or an invitation. It was a whisper, a possibility. That night, in my nightgown, lights off, I didn't sleep. I stood by the window, heartbeat loud in my ears. Across the lawn, their house glowed faintly. They were there, Jake, Laia by their window watching. No shame, no secrecy, just watching. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I didn't pretend. We'd all silently agreed. They didn't ask outright. They didn't need to. We left the curtains open, just enough to be seen, to pretend we didn't know. But when I looked up, they were watching. It was a Saturday night, so ordinary for something that changed everything. The air felt warm, still, like it was holding its breath. I'd spent too long choosing my dress. Not for Mark, not for me, but for them. A low-cut silk slip, thin straps, fabric that clung when I moved slowly. I told myself it was just another night. Wine, company. But I knew better. Jake and Laia arrived just after 9, a bottle of red in one hand, dark chocolate truffles in the other. They hugged us too close, too long. The lights were dim, candles flickering, music low and sultry, more rhythm than melody, like a pulse in the background. Mark poured wine. Jake handed me a glass, his fingers grazing mine deliberately, no pretending anymore. We sat in the living room, laughter echoing off walls, grown too silent for too long. The couch felt smaller, bodies closer, breath shorter. Laia sat cross-legged beside me, tracing her glass's rim, watching me, watching us. Jake leaned back, arm draped across the backrest, gaze heavy, unblinking. It started with teasing, comments, glances, a slow burn you feel in your stomach first. Then Laia leaned in, her breath warm against my neck, and whispered, "What would happen if we didn't stop this time?" I didn't answer. I didn't know. Or maybe I did. I looked at Mark, expecting confusion or resistance. But I saw stillness and hunger. That look shook me. Not because it was new, but because it had been gone so long. He didn't speak. Just set down his glass and looked at me like I was already slipping away. The rules were gone. No whispers, no pretense. Jake and Laia didn't move, didn't touch, didn't cross any lines. They just watched. And we let them. I felt the shift when Mark reached for me. Slow, uncertain. But when I didn't pull away, when I leaned in, something broke. Not loudly, but like glass cracking slowly, inevitably. They watched, unblinking. Jake's hand rested on Laia's thigh. Laia's nails dug into the couch, but they never interfered. They observed, and we performed. It felt unreal, like I was outside my body, watching myself do something I'd only imagined in my mind's darkest corners. I should have felt shame, should have recoiled, but I didn't. I felt exposed, but not like I was caught. It was deliberate exposure, like I wanted to be seen for the first time in years. I needed it. There was no turning back, no pausing to question right or wrong. The moment consumed all reason. Mark didn't speak or question, and I didn't look away, because the truth was I wanted it. Not just the act, but their eyes, their approval, their attention. It was intoxicating, wrong, twisted, but it felt like breathing after suffocating. When it ended, no one spoke. Laia stood and walked to the door like nothing had happened. Jake followed, nodding with that slow smirk. They left. No promises, no shame, just silence. I sat there, legs trembling, heart in my throat. Mark looked at me, not with judgment or regret, but emptiness, as if the act filled something fleeting, but carved out something deeper. I stared at the door they'd walked through, feeling every second of what we'd allowed, every line we'd crossed. And I didn't look away. The next morning, the silence was crushing, not comforting, but heavy, making breathing harder. Mark rose first, moving like nothing had changed, brushing his teeth, making coffee, checking emails. I sat on the bed's edge, staring at the floor, waiting for the night's weight to crash down. It didn't. No fights, no accusations, no awkward glances, no apologies. We never spoke of it, as if silence could erase it, as if pretending made it easier to bear. But it didn't. That day I moved through the house like it belonged to someone else. The photos, the laundry, the coffee cup from last night, all the same. But I wasn't. I felt like a layer of myself had been stripped away, exposed, reshaped. I avoided the windows, the house, but part of me listened for their footsteps, their voices. When I took out the trash that afternoon, I saw Laia watering her plants, waving as always. Too normal, too easy. Jake sat on their porch, reading, looking up with a lazy nod before returning to his book. Like the night was as routine as breakfast. That scared me. If they could move on so easily, if we could, what were we? What had we become? That night, I tried to broach it subtly. That was intense, wasn't it? Mark didn't look up from his laptop. Yeah, and that was it. No discussion, no reflection, no what does this mean? Just, yeah. Like he was open to more, like he wanted it. Suddenly, I wasn't sure what unsettled me more, what we'd done, or how comfortable he seemed. I began to see him differently, not with blame, but confusion. Was he the man I thought? Or had he been waiting for someone to unlock this side? Or had I changed, waiting for permission to become this version of myself. I felt it inside, the way I saw myself, edited by their eyes, their approval, their gaze. I asked myself, who was I doing this for? Mark, to rekindle something cold? Jake and Laya, to feel desired? Or me, because I felt powerful, present, seen in a way I hadn't since marriage stripped my mystery? But that power had a price. In the mirror, I saw two women, one standing by her husband, hand in his, and one in a candlelit room, watched and liking it. I didn't know which was truer or more dangerous. I stopped wearing certain clothes at home, stopped starting conversations, unsure what I'd say. I didn't know how to be casual with Mark after what we'd allowed. We slept on opposite sides of the bed again, the space between us thick with unasked questions. We didn't fight, cry, or process. We drifted, like boats floating from a shared shore. Every night, as I turned out the lights, I wondered, was this the start of something new, or the end of who we were? I wanted to feel desired, but now I felt dissected, torn apart by eyes that saw too much and maybe never saw me at all. The thrill faded, leaving a strange, aching void, like I'd traded something sacred for a fleeting feeling. And I can't stop thinking about how much I welcomed it. I wanted to be wanted so desperately. For one night, I got what I thought I needed. But at what cost? Now, in the mirror, I don't know who's looking back. She's not a stranger, just someone I don't fully trust. Was this about Mark's distance, or had I been slipping away long before Jake and Laya? It's easier to blame the silence in our marriage, to say he drifted first. But what if I'd been hiding too, behind routines, resentment, makeup, motherhood, the mask of being fine? What if this need to be seen was something I never let myself ask for? Jake saw me in a way Mark hadn't in years. That's true. But did he see me? Or just the version I performed? That gaze haunts me. Even now, I search for it in reflections, shadows, every glance through the window when I know he might be there. It's not love. It never was. It's validation, feeling alive. But I can't tell if that's better or worse. Mark hasn't mentioned it, and that silence screams louder than any fight. I don't know what's worse. That he's pretending it didn't happen, or that he's fine with it. I keep wondering if he agreed because he wanted it too, or because he didn't care enough to stop it. If it's the latter, what does that say about us? About me? I thought we crossed that line together, but now, in the quiet, it feels like I crossed it alone. Was it betrayal if we both agreed, or something worse? A betrayal of self? I didn't do this for Mark. Not really. And I didn't do it with him. He was there, but I was trying to reclaim me. The girl I was. The woman I wanted to be. The one who felt at home in her skin. But I traded invisibility for exposure. Now, when I close my eyes, I feel their gaze, their curiosity, their hunger, and mine. I don't know which version of me I miss more. The one starving for attention, or the one who knew how to survive without it. Have you ever done something, not because it was logical or safe, but to feel wanted, to matter, to be seen in a world that stopped noticing? I keep asking, was I wrong for letting it happen, or was I just a woman trying not to vanish? I didn't decide one day to cross a line. I didn't plan the murmurs, the whine, the lingering glances. It built slowly, quietly, until I wasn't watching the edge. I was stepping off. Now, I wonder if what I did was unforgivable or inevitable. Tell me in the comments. Was this betrayal, or two broken people trying to feel alive? the only way they knew. If stories like this stir your soul, leave you breathless, haunted, or questioning the parts of yourself you keep hidden, like this video, subscribe to Heartfelt Tales. Unfold. Here, we don't just tell stories. We unravel the parts of you no one sees. Some moments linger in the pauses between breaths. They don't shout. They whisper in the quietest silence. When the room stills, the dishes are done, the lights are out, and your heart recalls what your mind tried to forget. What we let them see, they never forgot, and neither did we. We didn't speak of it again. We tried to move on, but something lingered. In Mark's glances, in my avoidance of my reflection. Loneliness wears many faces. It can look like routine, sound like laughter, dress as consent, freedom, curiosity. But when you let others define your worth, when you surrender your need to be seen, you stop being a person. You become a mirror, reflecting their desire, their attention, not your truth. And when that attention fades, what remains? This was our choice. Yes, but not every choice is meant to be cherished. Some remind us, warn us, break us just enough to begin again. Now, in the same house, with the same walls and man, everything feels different. Because I am different. If you've ever chased yourself through someone else's eyes, you might understand. If you do, you're not alone. These stories aren't just mine. They're ours. What we carry when the lights go out, left with memory, regret, and the quiet hope that we're still worthy of love.